Welcome to Lesson 1 of the Ultimate Resilience Building, Health Optimizing 7-Step Guide to Performing Your Best, entitled Creating Peace. The opposite of peace is stress, and since stress makes up the reason of about 75 to 90% of all doctor visits every year, at least indirectly, let's talk a little bit about stress first. Stress is not good or bad in and of itself. If it's long-term stress that a person experiences, generally that's bad because it can lead to autoimmune problems, weight gain, osteoporosis, cancer, and a variety of lifestyle diseases. Here's an example of a good stress response. We're walking down the jungle, and all of a sudden, a saber-toothed tiger jumps out of the woods and attacks us. We don't even have to think about it, and our bodies undergo a series of chemical reactions, which causes our pupils to constrict, our blood to rush out to our extremities, our heart rate goes up, and all of a sudden, we are able to take flight from that tiger or fight that tiger, which is known as the flight or fight response. I would personally lay down and play dead, but that's just me. So that's an example of a short-term stress response, which allows the organism to adapt so that there's a long-term preservation. This is a survival instinct. Here's an example of another stress response. Imagine that it's late at night and you hear a noise and your dog hears that same noise, barks a couple of times, and then goes back to sleep. You lie there awake thinking, I wonder what that noise was. Was it a raccoon knocking over the trash can? Was it just the wind? Was it the boogeyman? Did I forget to put the leftovers away? And your mind just keeps racing on from topic to topic. And this is an example of a bad response because we tend to think that that noise is a boogeyman, and it goes on and on and on, and it doesn't solve any problems. Our dog just goes back to sleep and sleeps like a dog, as they say. The definition of stress is a specific response by the body to a stimulus as fear or pain that disturbs or interferes with the normal physiological equilibrium of an organism. Again, those first few words were a specific response. Now, if I were to ask you to have a seat at the edge of a table with your legs hanging over the side, and I had a rubber reflex hammer, and I asked you to relax your legs, and I was going to go ahead and tap the tendon right underneath your kneecap. What's going to happen to about 90% of the population is the quadriceps muscle will contract, and the lower leg will extend outward. But if I then ask you to contract your quadriceps and hamstrings muscle as I tapped your patellar tendon, you can most likely control that reflex and barely respond to the reflex hammer. And what I want to submit to you is that stress doesn't happen to us, but stress is the result of us not adapting correctly. And so the key question is, how can we increase our adaptability? To answer a question with a question, how can we create peace? Now, the human mind is very interesting to study, and it's even more complicated than the entire internet. But we can really only focus on one thing at a time. So it's really a losing battle to think about decreasing stress or preventing stress, just like it's almost useless trying to think about anything but a pink elephant. No matter how much you try, You're not going to eliminate the thought of a pink elephant as long as you keep on telling yourself, I don't want to think of that pink elephant. And not only that, it's pretty much impossible to have no stress in our lives at all. Everything is a process, and overall, we're either on the peace side or the good side of the mud pit that you don't want to fall into, or you're on the side of too much stress. But to be as peaceful as possible and to build up our resilience, which is what this recording is all about, we're going to focus on creating peace. Here are 6 checkpoints that you can use regularly to examine yourself in terms of how much peace are you creating in your life. Focus, faith, organization, planning, execution, and time management. Focus. I had a psychology teacher in high school one time who said that boredom is due to the lack of concentration. And if that's true, well, then the opposite of that must be true as well. In other words, no matter how boring something may seem at a time, if we choose to really focus on it and engage as many of our senses as possible, then we can actually make that experience an exciting one. If you can somehow make watching paint dry an exciting experience, if that is, then you're being very successful at controlling your focus. Faith. Some definitions of health not only include the mental, physical, and social aspects, but also include a spiritual aspect to health as well. It's very difficult to move ahead in life or to be constructive and have a sense of purpose and fulfillment if we're constantly looking into our rearview mirror. And what I mean by that is that many people seem to be depressed. And although I can't prove it, I am led to believe that a lot of that depression in society is rooted in a sense of guilt, which comes from unforgiven and unconfessed sin. I'm not talking about wronging a person from our past where we can ask forgiveness from them and they say, it's okay, and that relationship is restored, and then we move on with our lives. There's a real offense, I believe, towards God when we sin, and unless we restore that relationship on His terms, not our terms, then that's something that will carry with us. We didn't create ourselves, and we cannot solve the purpose for all of our feelings. So it's important to look outside for godly instruction in order to get that remedied. So the burden of unconfessed and unforgiven sin can cause guilt, which can affect our health mentally, emotionally, as well as eventually physically and even socially. Organization. In the movie Mrs. Doubtfire, Robin Williams, while playing the role of dad, says to his son, "You're the man of the house now, don't be messy." How we establish or maintain a special place for our ideas, and our notes, and our things for our personal development has so much to do with our mental health. A cluttered life is going to give us a cluttered mind, and if you're like me, the most cluttering thing is paper. Receipts, invoices, warranties, owner's manuals, kids' report cards, the list goes on and on. The best solution to that problem is finding a home system for inputting that information into your computer or laptop. They sell them online. You can go to Best Buy or even Staples now and get some kind of a scanning unit for your home that puts the paper information into your computer And then you can store it in separate files without much additional hardware or software. And then you just take that information and you would have it backed up off-site in case anything ever happens to your computer. And then that backup system will securely store that information in 3 separate physical locations off-site via satellite. The best system that I know of is a product that I use, and it's called CARBÓNITE. Next is planning. Planning, or setting goals, developing strategies, and outlining tasks of an objective, is important not only because we need to be prepared for certain things, but also because it's useful in managing our physiology. Imagine that you're a head coach in professional football and you have staff review game film of your own team and the opponent for next week so that you can develop a strategy to beat this team. And you know that your own best players are worth a lot to the franchise and they have a lot of talent, but for whatever reason, they just haven't been playing up to par lately. They do a good job in practice. They're committed to the team. They are buying into the coach's philosophy, but maybe they're just not playing well under pressure and during the actual game time. This is a perfect example of planning by physiology. This is a strategy taken from a sports psychology book, but you can relate it to any area of your own life. So you can think of a situation that you commonly encounter that makes you uneasy or fearful. Maybe it's a certain social situations, maybe it's family gatherings, maybe it's seeing a clown at a parade or a public speaking event. Think of that situation and all the negative things that could come out of it. For example, if it's public speaking, then maybe it's the possibility of the audience not understanding a joke or forgetting what you're going to say. And you just let your mind wander and drift towards all those negative things to the point that you can actually feel the changes in your own physiology. Maybe you notice your blood pressure changing or your heart is pounding and maybe you're getting a little sweaty and cold. Once you have that physical response, you know that you're putting yourself into that state and you have been real with yourself when you experience these fears. Now, maybe these aren't rational fears, but nevertheless, they probably feel like a movie that you have run in your head over and over and over already in the past, theater of your mind, and you don't want to re-experience them again, so you sort of reverse engineer, you write down all those fears, and next to it, you write down the exact opposite of that. Maybe it's everybody accepting what you're saying, or people laughing and just having a good time. Whatever it takes to put yourself at ease in that situation. Then you meditate on that until your own physiology slows down. Maybe you're breathing through your nose, using your diaphragm while laying alone in a dark room for 12 to 15 minutes, and you eventually notice your heart rate slowing down. And therefore, in a couple hours or next week or in a couple of minutes, when you're ready to take that stage, you're more likely to have that calm and relaxed response as opposed to that uneasy and stressed out and fearful state. Execution. How many times have you sat around a pool and heard a small child yell, "Mommy, Daddy, watch me"? Then they race over to the pool and they jump in the deep end, and as soon as they get out, they ask their parents if they saw what they did. And mom and dad probably say, "Yep." Just because that child's parents acknowledge what they did, they get a tremendous sense of accomplishment and confidence and esteem because they were maybe afraid to jump in at one point, and now they're ready to take it up a notch next time, and maybe they'll try it without floaties or without that tube around their waist because they have this powerful sense of momentum that they had accomplished something. Momentum is an important thing for adults as well in terms of creating peace and practicing good execution of our goals. One of the best and easiest ways to practice good execution and experience a sense of momentum in your life is to have a prioritized and time-blocked list of things to do. And when we accomplish those bullet points on our list and we cross it off, that gives us a sense of momentum and accomplishment, just like the swimming child. And that's important because for productivity and assuming that we're doing what we love to do and doing it with a sense of purpose, really the only thing that matters at the end of the day is what gets done. Last but not least is time management. Time management is so important because how we redeem our individual minutes will ultimately determine our level of success in the various roles that we play in life. I'd highly recommend reading a book on time management, and I think that most books and seminars on the subject will say pretty much the same thing overall, or at least have a couple of lessons in common. That being procrastination is really, really bad, and that we should have a list of goals or things to do for the day. But I recommend the time management book by Dan Kennedy because he has a great view on eliminating two types of distractions. Ones that we have control over and the ones that we don't have control over. Most time management lessons don't take into consideration that nobody is perfectly efficient because there are distractions out there that are beyond our ability to control. And so Kennedy teaches a realistic way to handle those distractions gracefully and budget them into your time bank, which makes for a less frustration when those distractions do happen. It's also important to keep a journal once in a while to log how you are redeeming your minutes, how you're using your time. All you have to do is for a week or so at random times, set your cell phone or some kind of alarm to periodically go off, and you stop and you write down what you're doing, and then a couple of weeks or a week after this exercise, you'd go back and evaluate how efficient you were during your peak productive hours. Were you distracted? What were you thinking about? Were you daydreaming, or were you doing what you were actually supposed to be doing in order to get closer to the goal line? You might be interested to find at the end of your study that you were not as focused as you thought that you were. And this is a problem because that means that what's inevitably going to happen is that you need to work even harder with the fewer hours that you have left in the day in order to reach your goal. And this, of course, creates stress, which is the opposite of peace, which is the opposite of what we're going after. In conclusion, just remember that you are in control of how your body responds to the given situation. Stress is the result of not adapting appropriately and calmly, and you are in charge of your perceptions and your paradigms from which you view things. What you think might be a barrier or a speed bump or obstacle very well might be a springboard to an opportunity. Thanks for listening.